Welcome to Truth by Billie Beene. Today's date, April 14, 2025. Time in Texas about 8 a.m. I have a subscribe button in the lower right corner of my screen. Thanks for like, subscribe, and share, and for hitting the like button. That helps my channel to grow. Some of my sources today: God in the Bible, Patriot subscribers, Wall Street Journal, Hal Turner, Breitbart, New York Prepper, Canadian Prepper, Judge Napolitano Plus. Some of the things we'll cover: President Trump, U.S. military to the border, and China and Iran plots against America, and the White House announces and declares he is risen. So let's get started. We have information coming out that things are going on that most people are not expecting. We had in Russia a few days ago, the Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Rudinko announcing Russia does not want to get involved with another conflict over Iran. So that's a good deal. We don't want Russia involved with our interaction with Iran either. Recently, there was a meeting between the U.S. and Iran that happened Saturday in Oman. Steve Witkoff, President Trump's envoy, met with Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, and it said that things went well in the meeting, and that some of the things President Trump put forth via his envoy, Steve Witkoff, was for Iran to stop enriching uranium and to dilute its current stockpile of 60% uranium so that it cannot have a nuclear bomb, and also to let in U.S. inspectors. And we have this: Judge Napolitano recently interviewed Scott Ritter. Scott was a Marine, and he formerly was a UN nuclear weapons inspector, talking about Iran. Now, I have put forth what I believe. I believe Iran has probably had nuclear weapons for decades. We have an agency in the U.S. government, the DIA, that says that Iran stopped its enrichment program in 2003. Scott Ritter puts forth to support President Trump's position. President Trump has said Iran cannot be allowed to get nuclear weapons. Scott Ritter says that Iran is, if they do not have nuclear weapons, they are definitely on the threshold of having nuclear weapons, and it's very likely that they could make 3 to 5 nuclear bombs within 1 week using their current stockpile of 60% enriched uranium. So that puts to bed people who are declaring Iran does not have nuclear weapons. Scott says they're on the threshold, though, and they could do so within a week. We have this from Fox News. The U.S. has put together a new, stronger nuclear weapon. It's called the B-61B, and this nuclear bomb, the U.S. has already put it in place, is 24 times stronger Then the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. That makes this current bomb the U.S. has 360 kilotons. So that's going on. All right. And now we have this. So Hal Turner is putting this forth. There is now conclusive proof that Israel did use a 0.3 kiloton nuclear bomb in Syria recently when the former president of Syria, Assad, was pushed out. There was Russia with its Tartarus. So along the coastline of Syria, right about here, we have Israel, Tartarus. Russia had military bases. So now, Hal Turner puts this out. There's now conclusive proof that Israel used a 0.3 kiloton, which is a tactical nuke, and bombed Tartarus, the Russian bases. And that's why, as Assad was being pushed out, Russia was moving its planes and its troops out of its Syria base. It was a tactical nuke, and Israel used it December 15, 2024. The proof that Israel did this includes radiation, which in February of 2025 in that area was 60 times above norm. And this is being said to be 100% more than the bombs dropped in Japan. 100% more than Nagasaki and 50% more than Hiroshima. Additional proof is based on, in addition to the radiation readings, a seismograph went off registering a 3.0 magnitude event. And it's now believed Russia evacuated their bases. This would have been in December because of the radiation. So that's going on. We see nukes. From the Tampa Free Press, President Trump, to make America safer, is going to be putting troops along the California, U.S. military will be put in place along California, Arizona, and New Mexico. Another way that President Trump is shoring up the rights of American citizens is he is having his AG, Pam Bondi, put in place a task force, which she has done. And the purpose of the task force is to oppose any rulings by states that would take away from Second Amendment rights of American citizens. And we have this from the Independent. Based on the recent tariffs President Trump put in place, Apple is flying out of India. That happened a couple of days ago. 1.5 million iPhones to beat the tariffs. And these iPhones contain parts that would be produced in China. We know that President Trump's current tariff against China is now 145%. I have this from a Patriot subscriber. Based on my last video in which I was detailing an experience I had in college, going to a mosque and hearing the Muslim preacher talking about overthrowing the government of the United States of America by Muslims coming into this nation, becoming citizens, raising children to grow up to be politicians, to take over the government. And that correlates with what Mike from around the world says the U.S. government knows already. Multi-generational individuals in America are doing just that. They're staying true, even though they've become American citizens. They're staying true to their country of origin and to their religion, and their objective is to overthrow the government, which they call the Great Satan. My Patriot subscriber says, I found your report frightening. We do know this is happening in the UK, and if we all don't wake up, it's going to be too late. God bless you and our country. So yes, the reason the deep state brought in immigrants, not just to America, but in Europe, is for that purpose, not to assimilate, but to overthrow the governments and put in place Sharia law, and so on. I have this from New York Prepper. The U.S. military is putting in place plans to use drone strikes in Mexico to hit cartel leaders and logistical locations. And as I said, President Trump has used a law or act that took place under President Roosevelt to put the U.S. military in charge of the southern border in California, Arizona, and New Mexico. This is actually federal land, and it is a buffer zone about 60 miles wide. So President Trump has put that in place. And from New York Prepper, the European tariffs on U.S. goods. Yeah, Europe is putting heavy tariffs on U.S. goods to begin April 15. And they are putting tariffs up to 25% on U.S. goods, including soy, motorcycles, and orange juice. Yes, those nations who are retaliating against the 10% U.S. tariff are going to find much higher tariffs on their goods. And we have this from Hal Turner. Yes, the stock market has been fluctuating, and we have China calling the U.S. a tariff-wielding barbarian nation. China also kills the TikTok sale. So that's going on. We do see apparently China's economy is very weak, and President Trump's tariff move against China is to take China down, as the U.S. was able to do with the Soviet Union in 1991 economically. Sun Tzu, Art of War, overcome your enemy any way you can without using your military. So taking down your enemy economically is a great way to do it. We have this from Breitbart saying that President Trump's move is brilliant, and it's based on the optimum tariff theory, and President Trump is doing what's best for America, And under the optimum tariff theory, to make America rich again, is to put an across-the-board 10% tariff on all goods being imported into this nation. And it is stated to be a perfect real-world application of tariffs. So that's going on. And we have this. Tariffs will crush China's TEMU. China's TEMU is a company designed to take trade away from Amazon. So China would ship in inexpensive goods by mail and thus bypassing shipment rules. However, President Trump also has extended the tariffs against China to apply to what's called de minimis or small envelope packages. And it's believed China uses this method also to ship drugs such as fentanyl into the U.S. So President Trump's tariffs, it's believed, will crush China's alternative to Amazon, which is called TEMU. So that's going on. And now we have this from Market Watch. Ray Dalio, an economist, says that China's currency is very weak. He was the founder of Bridgewater and Associates, and he has visited China many times and says that currently China has tariffs against the U.S. 84%, and U.S. tariffs against China are 145%. We have this. I have a Facebook friend who put this out in Irving, Texas, and that's up around Dallas. There's already a Muslim community there, 100% Muslim. They teach Quran in the school. Quran is the Muslim teaching book, like we would teach the Bible. There are no pets allowed in this community. The street names are written in Muslim, and it's believed that the Muslims plan to take Texas down. Well, we'll see about that. And we have this from the Wall Street Journal. China officials admitted in a secret meeting in December in Beijing that China had acted as an enemy against America, committing acts that are considered acts of war by cyber attacking U.S. ports, U.S. water facilities, U.S. airports, and stating that they're doing this because the U.S. supports Taiwan. This was a secret meeting in December held in Geneva, and the details are coming out. I submit to you, China is acting in multiple acts of war against the U.S., and as I put out that recent crash in Washington, D.C. between a U.S. military Black Hawk and an American Airlines Eagle plane, I put forth, I believed it was third party. Information has come out supporting that. I believe that third party that's interfering with the navigation systems on planes, I believe that's China. And we just had yesterday in New York, we had another plane go down and 6 were killed. That happened yesterday. And apparently it was another example of a third party controlling the navigation and instruments on the plane, because the plane was going to land in New York. It needed to do a go around. And while it was going around, the airport tower detected that the plane was too low. And they called out to the pilot 3 times. There was no response, and the plane crashed. I submit that's another example of a third party interfering with the plane and resulting in a crash. I firmly believe that third party is China. The secret meeting in December in Geneva, the intel is coming out that the Chinese representatives admitted they had been making cyber attacks on many areas in the U.S. I submit China was the third party who brought down that U.S. military Black Hawk and the American Eagles plane. That happened recently. So we see China is actively engaged in acts of war against the United States of America. And we have this. We also had that recent crash of a helicopter near New York, and where the pilot and a family of 5 were all killed. That plane carried Agustin Escobar, a CEO of Siemens in Spain. And so that went down. I believe that was also third-party interference. We have this from Real Raw News. Recently in Ukraine, a Russian Spetsnaz, or Russian Special Forces, came across 11 American children ages 7 to 12 who were being kept chained up in a dungeon, apparently ready to go into Zelensky's child trafficking network. They had been kidnapped from the Archie Hotel in Warsaw, Poland, where their families had been vacationing. So that's going on. The Archie Hotel Poloneza, located in Warsaw, Poland. So that's going on. And now the Russian government has contacted President Trump's Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, to make arrangements to transport the American children back to the United States. We have this from BORZIKKMAN, Zelensky, who also makes money off of trafficking in Ukraine. So far, it's believed that recently took about $30 billion from the U.S. and is making money on selling the U.S. weapons that go to Ukraine on the black market, which are going back to the Middle East and the cartels. Recently, Zelensky bought in Italy a winery, Teneta il Palacio Winery. He also has purchased recently a controlling interest in the largest private bank in France, Milius Bank, and just this week he bought an interest in a Palladium Limited, 51%, for which he paid $2 billion. So we see Zelensky steals right and left from America, sells the weapons on the black market, and it's believed that Zelensky also benefits from the trafficking of children in Ukraine. And now we have this from Hal Turner. China, fighting against the U.S., has canceled all of its orders for LNG, liquefied natural gas, from the U.S. Now, that's not going to be a problem for the U.S. There are plenty of countries who want to buy our LNG. The U.S., in retaliation, on the U.S. stock exchange, is delisting all Chinese companies. So that's going on. And now we have this. Yes. Okay. This is a story I first saw on Facebook, put out by my previous pastor at Clute First Baptist Church in Clute, Texas. That was Pastor Josh McGee. He and his wife, Jen McGee, about 2 years ago, made a trip to South Africa. They met with the church there. I believe that's sponsored by a Baptist organization out of Tennessee, Fellowship Baptist Organization based in Tennessee. And they met with several pastors there in South Africa, near Cape Town. And they met with one pastor, Josh Sullivan, who's been pastoring in South Africa since 2018. Last week, 6 armed men burst into his church in South Africa at gunpoint and kidnapped him. There were about 30 people there, including his wife and 6 children, who witnessed the kidnapping. So Pastor Josh McGee and his wife Jen are currently pastoring at Calvary Baptist in New Braunfels, Texas, are requesting prayers for this pastor being held in South Africa. I would have to believe that President Trump is fully aware of the situation and is taking action. And we have this. President Trump, along with 80% of the American people, have not forgotten that we witnessed a political coup, an overthrow of the government of the United States of America in 2020. For my part, I believe President Trump should order an investigation of all members of Congress who voted to put JB in, because I assure you, each of those individuals would have known that JB was not elected. President Trump puts out a memo to investigate the presidential election of 2020 using the DOJ and Homeland Security. So that's going on. And now we have this. I have this from a Facebook friend who says, American citizens, oh yes, So we had President Trump active recently in getting an American citizen released from Russia. She had been held on some charges that are kind of questionable. A ballerina, Casina Carolina. President Trump got her released, and she also met up with her fiance at the gate in near Washington, D.C. when she was released. Her fiance is a boxer, I believe. A professional boxer. Chris Van Herrit is her fiance. President Trump also had his special envoy to the Middle East, Morgan Ortagus, meet her and gift her with flowers. And this young woman says, "I'm so grateful to President Trump for bringing me home, and I am happy to be an American citizen. And I thank you, President Trump." So that's going on. She was involved in a prisoner swap with Russia. That happened last Thursday. And President Trump was able to get her released. So she is praising President Trump and stating how happy she is to be an American. So that's going on. And now we have this. We have this from Hal Turner. What President Trump is using now to put the U.S. military in California, Arizona, and New Mexico is called the Roosevelt Reservation Act of 1907. It puts the U.S. military in control of a federal buffer zone that is 60 feet wide. And the U.S. military is in charge of this zone, 60 feet wide. And under this Roosevelt Reservation Act, the U.S. military can arrest illegals. They don't have to go through any other process. And we have this. President Trump is intent on stopping the cartels and the flow of fentanyl from China, Canada, and Mexico. And he is putting the U.S. military in place where it's legal to do so. That's along the border, California, Arizona, New Mexico. The U.S. military, it's believed, is putting in place the ability to use drones over Mexico to hit cartel leaders and logistical hubs. President Trump is also going to be withdrawing 40,000 troops from Europe to bring them back to the U.S. to help defend America. The CIA is now doing due diligence to review its authority to use lethal force in Mexico as assigned by President Trump. The CIA has already approval to use drones, and it has direct action kill teams within its Special Activities Division, which President Trump is putting on the table also. So that's going on. And we have this. The Department of Education is cutting all federal money to Maine for kindergarten through 12th grade because the Dem government of Maine refuses to obey federal rules and rules put in place by President Trump as it continues to allow men to compete in women's sports. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Iran. So I've already put forth China. We have China saying, yes, we've been using cyber warfare against America, and they've been doing this for decades. I submit it is China who is behind these cyber attacks, also as a third party on planes and helicopters. Now, Hal Turner brought out some interesting information verifying what I had put out in 2020 and also 2021, that China had in this area, and I also had information about an area near North Dakota. China, in 2020, we know, and I'm putting forth my belief that the election was stolen. So we had President Trump leaving and JB to come in. It's then that China tried to invade the United States of America. We had an incident up in Michigan. So my sources then were DECODE and the late Kirsten W. plus reports from my Patriot subscribers on the ground in Michigan and Northeast U.S., plus in Canada, Vancouver, who reported tens of thousands of CCP military. Now, what happened was, this happened, I believe, in December of 2020. The U.S. military had a plane up and it was shot down by the CCP and actually divided the plane, but the pilot and co-pilot were able to eject. The U.S. military had 2 ships in this area, and they used special forces, and they located the pilot and co-pilot and rescued them. Then the U.S. used a bunker-busting bomb to the underground areas on the border of Canada and Northeast U.S. and took out 50,000 CCP. A few months later, on the border of Canada and North Dakota, we had a second incursion attempted. That was 20,000 CCP in underground bunkers. The U.S. used a rod from God dropped from space. A rod from God is just a tight bundle of tungsten rods bound together, dropped from space. They're very effective as a bunker buster. So we took out 50,000 CCP in an underground bunker here. A few months later, we took out 20,000 CCP, also in underground bunkers. So in 2020, my sources were DECODE and the late Kirsten W. plus my own Patriot subscribers on the ground. One who reported about the plane and CCP bringing it down. One in Vancouver who had seen hundreds, if not thousands, of CCP in that area on the ground. Now, Hal Turner's intel is substantiating or confirming this information that I had in 2020. Now, inside the U.S., it's believed we have 1.2 million CCP. That number comes from Mike from around the world. So it's good to keep your powder dry, baby. And we're seeing moves by President Trump as our commander-in-chief. Also, recently in Greenland, the commander of the U.S. military base was relieved of command. Recently, we had Vice President Vance visit Greenland. After he left, this U.S. military commander committed both in writing and verbally. She communicated to everyone on the base, both by in writing a memo and by speaking over the loudspeakers a message stating something that sounded like she was not in touch with the real world. Some could interpret it as treason. And she stated that the U.S. military was not under political control of the federal government, and that the views being put forth by the federal government were not those of the U.S. military. Well, the U.S. military, by our Constitution, is directly under the control of the American president, and one of his titles is Commander-in-Chief. President Trump relieved her of command for insubordination. Really, her comments sounded like treason to me. So that's going on. And now, in putting forth some information, much information has come out stating that President Trump became a member of the Jewish religion in 2017. I put forth President Trump's own words. In lieu of a short prayer, I'll tell you what President Trump posted on his Truth Social last night about 11 p.m. and share that the White House will have all this week religious leaders, Christian religious leaders, and various activities to celebrate Easter. And this is what President Trump posted. This Holy Week, for the Christian world, we remember the crucifixion of God's only begotten Son, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And on Easter Sunday, we celebrate His glorious resurrection and proclaim, as Christians have done for nearly 2,000 years, He is risen. And through the pain and sacrifice of Jesus on the cross, we saw God's boundless love and devotion to all humanity. And in that moment of His resurrection, history was forever changed with the promise of everlasting life. As we approach this joyous Easter Sunday, I want to wish Christians everywhere a happy and very blessed holiday. America is a nation of believers. We need God, we want God, and with His help, we will make our nation stronger, safer, greater, more prosperous, and more united than ever before. Thank you and happy Easter. And I say to my family and friends, remain steady out there, continue to pray. God is in charge and He is on the move. I love you and I'll see you soon.